Reagan Nemetsky.
Yes.
At ATX Ray, at Mama Nemetsky, at ATX Ray Family, at Mama Nemetsky, at
so many
100
Instagrams.
different Instagrams you've created over the time.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that you're here.
So glad to be here.
Yeah, are you?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm trying to tell by your face, but I think that you're glad to be here, so I'll believe you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for being here.
Of course.
When I asked you, hey, are you interested in coming to sit down and have a conversation? What were your initial thoughts? And why did you say yes? Why are you here?
My initial thoughts were, oh crap, I have to talk about myself. And I definitely said yes because I care about you and you're a good friend and I would do anything for you.
Wow, thank you.
But my initial thoughts were, that like, crap, I got to talk about myself.
Yeah. Have you done any podcasting?
I have not.
This is your first time?
Mm-hmm.
To be fair, this is like my 7th time, so I'm not much more experienced than
Here we go.
Yeah.
Cheers.
And cheers to that. Well, thanks for being here. So one of the things I'm curious about is for people who don't follow you or know you or who haven't seen you on my page from before, you actually have a lot of experience in the social media world. When I first met you, before we had even worked together, you had like a pretty big following. You were pretty active online. You've kind of ebbed and flowed in your presence. You have kids and you have like a whole life and a marriage and the whole thing outside of like the rest of us who are just kind of doing things. So you're a busy person and you have a lot going on. But talk to me a little bit about how you got involved in the social media world. How did you, I don't know if you consider yourself an influencer.
Yeah.
But how did you end up even taking like social media seriously in terms of like potentially maybe building a career out of it or at least using it to like, launch yourself into cool things?
Yeah, for sure. I have always loved content creation. I have had a strong love for editing and photography and videography and everything in between. It started as just this like small project of making vlogs. Like my first vlog I ever made was in 2019 with my kids for New Year's. And it was just this random vlog of us going and picking out things for New Year's and doing a little New Year's celebration. And I loved it. And it's mainly for the memories. I have never really been someone who cares about a very large following. Of course, it would be so nice to have this huge following and be successful and like make this a career, but it has never really been about that for me. When I got into like more modeling stuff, that's whenever I realized how beneficial it can be to have a big following. And so I focused really on growing that following. But mainly like my whole intention with it was to like just create and have fun and have memories and everything like that. Like I just want to be able to have photos for whenever I look back when I was in my 20s, like my kids will be like, damn, my mom was hot, kind of thing like that. Like that's been like my whole goal, is just to like have fun and create and have memories to look back on.
That's awesome. I'm sure they will look back and they will be excited that you made all those things. Because my family has like a couple of home videos of things that, we were doing as children. Yeah. And I love those. Yeah. And like when you're moving or when you're like cleaning things and you find the box of stuff and you've been like going hard cleaning your house and then you find it and then 4 hours later you're like, oh no, I've just been sitting here going through all these things and I haven't done anything else. I love those moments. And one of the reasons why I love photography is too that like you're creating things that in 10 years, in 20 years will become a lot more meaningful than they might be right now. But the other weird thing is like our kids are going to have YouTube videos of us.
I know.
Like they're going to be like high def, like quality videos of us at their age. It's like the most that we have is like our parents at like 30 or like late 20s and they're all home videos, and they're all on like really crappy like
VDR,
VHS tapes.
Yes.
They're not like quality. And our kids are going to have access to like the angsty things we tweeted as like 16-year-olds.
Embarrassing shit.
Right, exactly. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, you can't even tell me not to be like angsty and irrational because you did. Like they're going to have receipts from us, and that's kind of scary.
Mm-hmm.
But like you kind of built like, you didn't just make vlogs, you like got fans, like you got followers.
Yeah.
What was there a moment where you kind of were like, oh shoot, I might be onto something here in the like social media world?
Yeah. So like TikTok especially is somewhere where you can build a crazy amount of followers quickly. And I didn't realize that until I built a crazy amount of followers very quickly when I posted my hand pay from Vegas. So I went to Vegas with my husband, and the story is basically we were in Vegas and we were just having a normal trip, fun. We always do it like almost once a year. We go to Vegas, and I love the game Buffalo Gold. It's a slot machine. And I decided like that day, I only give myself like $100 a day. And so we had like a 5-day trip, only $100 a day for budget for gambling. And this day, it was like my last day there. I was getting on a plane in like 4 hours, and I was like, okay, I have like $40 left in my gambling budget. I'm going to just spend the rest. F it. Like, let's just spend it. And I put $40 in the machine, and I clicked the button, and then I hit a huge win, like an insane win. I won $3,600 from $40. From $40. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is insane. They had to come out and like hand pay me it. And my husband got a video of it, and I posted it on TikTok right before I went on the plane. So my phone was in airplane mode. I had no idea. Like I had just downloaded TikTok. Like I'm one of those cusp Gen Zers where like I was born in 99. So like I'm kind of like in Gen Z, but I would not consider myself Gen Z because I grew up with a lot of like the millennial things, and like my siblings are millennials. So I'm like on the cusp. And so like getting into TikTok was not super easy for me. And I kind of was one of those people who like rejected it for a while. But this time, like I had just posted it randomly because I just downloaded it, and I get off the plane and I turn my phone off of airplane mode, and it blew up. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have a viral video. And so this
how viral? Like
900,000 views
wow. So you almost got to the
couple
million
of hours.
Just in that time.
In a couple of hours. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like TikTok is legitimate with like building people's social media presence. And so that's actually where I started to really focus, was TikTok. And so after having like this like almost kind of like gambling following, I had a lot of followers, probably like 10K at this point. I just started making like mom vlogs and stuff like that until I didn't anymore. And I started talking about my relationship, which you know a little bit about, but I started talking about hot wifing, which is what my husband and I do. And that is when my TikTok really took off, and I built up a following of about 70,000 followers. And that is how I know TikTok like sets itself apart from other social media platforms, because that's the only platform that you can organically grow to 70,000 followers in a couple months. Crazy.
Yeah.
And so I had all these followers, and it just like, I grew very organically, talked about my life, stuff like that. And I forgot the question.
No, that's that was
crazy. A long spiel.
No, I think I love stories like that because, I mean, I hate them in some way because those of us who are trying to like grind and build a following, it's like, oh, we see these people who
overnight success.
Right. They hit like the jackpot literally on these contents. And then there's other people who grind and create amazing content for months and there's like nothing.
Yeah.
So like a part of me hates you a little bit. But I also think that's the beauty, right? Like that's the beauty of social media too, is that it can do that. Well, what's your current relationship with it?
So as you know, like I've talked to you about this, haven't talked to the social media about this, but I kind of go in and out of being on social media because of how much damage it has caused me. With talking about my relationship, which is for people who don't know, I am what would be considered a hot wife, which is I see other people outside of my marriage, for the pleasure of my husband and, you know, what we have decided to do with our relationship. And it's what I've talked about a lot on TikTok. But I deactivated that TikTok because with talking about that and trying to get away from that taboo of like, you are, you know, just these terrible people who like can't commit and can't, you know, be happy individually. Like we totally could. It's just we explore outside of that because those things interest us and make us happy and whatever it may be. So with that, I talked about that on social media and it went well for a while. And it's kind of like one of those things where like so many people are supportive, but it's those few that are mean and negative that kill it.
Yeah, and so they feel like the loudest ones in the room.
Right, exactly. So like we had 70,000 people being like, I support you. I love you. You made me and my wife's relationship so much better because you talked about this. I had women and men both reaching out to me saying like, thank you so much for talking about this. Like I needed someone to do this because it helped me explain to my partner what I wanted. It helped me tell other people what this is all about. And with that, like I felt really good about what I was doing, but then it was those few people who told me to off myself, my bloodline to be killed, like stuff like that. Like people who literally just said the most deranged and like negative things that made me get off of social media. So like my relationship with social media has been like very up and down, where I'm slowly getting back to the part of like, I'm doing this for my happiness. Content creation is fun. I'm doing this for the memories kind of thing. And like, those are still very prominent in my life, but I don't know if I would ever try to pursue it in like a career-wise way again because of all the hate I've received.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that's like because, you know, you were trying to be authentic, right? Like to be transparent about the lifestyle that you've chosen and the way that you live your life and not in like this is the right way to do it. Like you weren't saying like, this is what people should be doing. And this is what I think is the best way, but just, this is what we've done. And yet people projected their own opinions about their views on whether or not it was good or bad. And yeah, that's really hard because like, what are you going to not be honest? Like it's really hard to go into a space where you're like, I have to keep certain things to myself because it's just too dangerous. And then you kind of feel stifled, right? Because you're not being who you want to be, or you're not being a complete version of yourself.
Right.
What do you think the long-term social media plan is for you? Like, what do you like, or what's your like dream? What's the dream situation?
So like my real authentic dream with it is to probably be like, I would love to be on TikTok full time where I'm just talking about my life and being like a daily influencer. Like that is something I strive to be, but I would get into these really just like negative, depressed times where I'm like, I can't do it anymore, you know? So like, it's kind of like a struggle with that. It's kind of like one of those mindset things where you have to stay persistent in that way, is like, you need to push yourself to continue to do that. That would probably be my main goal is to continue to do social media in that way. I don't think I would ever talk about my relationship on social media again because of all of the negativity that comes with it. With social media, though, I think that it's just something that I will continue to use as an outlet for creativity, and probably that's the maximum of what I will do, because in all honesty, it's very, very hard to create a organic following with people who are genuinely curious in your life, for just simple things like my daily life. So I don't know if I would ever do that. I think I have too many people who know me as the girl who is in an open relationship that I could probably never go back. So
yeah, that's really hard. I mean, I do think there's wisdom in creating boundaries, you know, as you reapproach it, if you reapproach it seriously.
Yeah.
You know, and that probably be my advice to most people, which is if you're getting into it with a more business perspective or a more, you know, career, or I want to leverage this for more than just personal outlet for my life, to be thinking about what are the boundaries? As I grow an audience, what am I wanting to be known, and what do I want to be kind of kept for myself?
For sure.
And I actually do think it's probably smart to keep more private things, no matter what your situation is, because it's like, why would you give people power to speak into things that aren't their place, where they don't know the context of things? And they're just going to project.
Context is everything.
Context is everything. You're the first person to talk about the title. You know, you don't necessarily want to give people the freedom to step into things that they don't know about. And it's true. Like, we are, like, physiologically, we respond much greater to negative feedback than positive. You can get 5 compliments and 1 critique, and you only remember the critique.
For sure.
Because negative feedback weighs so much heavier on us.
It's something you'll always remember.
Right. And there's things that people have said to me offhand that I still think about to this day.
Yeah.
There are things that people have probably said, and they might have been joking, or they only half meant it. And yet I still think about that. Or significant others who have made comments about, you know, what I look like, or what they wish I would do differently. And I'm now like, I dwell on those things, and I'm like,
live with you forever.
Right. Exactly. And so there's some wisdom in, you know, creating those boundaries. So you mentioned that you've done modeling, and you've done a lot of creative stuff. How did you get into that, and what do you love about those types of projects?
Modeling honestly started when I was actually pretty young. My parents would do these little photo shoots every year for me, and they always would say, like, you're destined to be this little model. And like, and it just, I always was just told that I was destined for this kind of like life of like modeling. And so whenever I got into high school, I booked a few shoots with like local boutiques, and I was in a couple magazines and boutique shoots and stuff like that. And I really did fall in love with it. Like, I really did love it. And I would go out with photographers who were around my age too, when I was a teenager, and like help them establish this career. And then when I became an adult, I kind of just continued that path of like, I'm going to continue this kind of like helping my fellow creative, and like continuing this like fun modeling experience. I would never consider myself a professional model. I've been published a few times. I've been in like a couple of catalogs, and like I've done website modeling and stuff like that. But like, I would never consider myself someone who's like a established model, because I'm not on Vogue. I'm not on a runway. I'm not doing like New York Fashion Week, stuff like that. But I find the joy in being in front of the camera. And I think that that's all you really need to consider yourself a model, is like, if you're someone's muse, you're a model, baby. So, yeah.
I love that. What, as an adult model, as someone who's in the photography scene, have you run into like things that you think are problems, that you think are issues? Like, you know, I think nowadays there's kind of this sense of like, oh, everyone's a photographer. Like everyone kind of
picks up a camera
and wants to try to do it. We're in a content heavy world. So there's this like huge need for them anyway. As someone who is in front of the camera and not behind the camera, have you run into anything, or have you seen trends or things that you're like, hey, I really wish this would not be the case, or I really wish we would be talking more about these certain things?
Oh, absolutely. Like whenever I started, I was very heavily in that group of ATX models and photographers.
Like the local Facebook groups.
Yeah, the local Facebook groups where we would like do trades and everything like that. And I think that I distanced myself a lot from modeling and only started working with a select few because of all of the situations that I have run into and like learning from that. So like when it comes to like people I trust with myself and people I don't, it like has everything to do with like how you present yourself when you're there. So like, for example, like you, when we worked together, you were very clear about how you're going to respect my boundaries, like what you do not expect from me, what you do expect from me. Like you really didn't expect much. You just were like, hey, I'm here to capture what you want to capture, and whatever you're comfortable with, that's what I'm comfortable with. And that I really appreciated. And I think that made me more comfortable than anything. Whereas there's been people who have been like, no, you can't take a second person with you to help you like get through this shoot. And like, I remember one shoot I showed up to with a male photographer. I had one off mentioned my husband where he didn't know I was married, and he was like, oh, you're married, and like made a big deal out of it. And I was like, yeah, are you only shooting with me because I'm a pretty girl? Like, what the hell? Like, kind of like, why'd you make that comment? And so like, there are, you know, red flags when it comes to it. And there's a big reason I stopped working with like Trade for Photo and why I only work with like you and one other photographer, because I have been put in so many uncomfortable positions. And there's been conversations in that Facebook group where I'm like, I really do not agree with some of the things these people are saying, like where they don't value the model, you know? Like, there's one instance that I actually feel like I kind of completely got turned off to doing trade for, was because we were talking in the Facebook group. Someone had asked about picking photos to be used. I think we've talked about this before, but it's like picking photos to be used after a shoot. And a bunch of photographers were basically being like, well, it's my craft and like I get to choose what's being used and you don't get to choose it. If you're a model, like the only thing you're trading for are those photos. You're in front of the camera and then you get what I give you. And like, it doesn't matter if it's 5 photos, 3 photos, 2 photos, 1 photo, like you get what I give you. And I'm like, okay, like I get having a set amount of expectations of like a set amount of photos. Like that's okay. If you set that expectation beforehand, great. But if you're saying that I can't choose from that amount of photos what gets published of myself and it's a trade, that makes me uncomfortable. Because if you see a photo and you're like, that's a beautiful photo, and then I see a photo and I'm like, I'm insecure about that photo, and you publish it anyways, they were saying in that group chat that that's okay. That's okay to make a model uncomfortable, because I'm the photographer, and if you don't like my work, then why are you working with me? I wouldn't ever choose a photo that made you feel ugly. You don't know my insecurities. You don't know what would make me feel insecure or uncomfortable. You don't know if it's my nose. You don't know if my jaw. You don't know if it's whatever. But you decided that you knew me better because you're the photographer. Yeah. And so that's why I got really turned off with accepting trades, was because of people like that. And so I kind of just stopped modeling and really only accepted from a few people.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's a long spiel. I talk a lot.
No, that's good. That's why you're here. Well, first of all, I really appreciate you sharing that. I'm really thankful that was your experience when we worked together. Mm-hmm. I'm really not trying to bring on people who I've worked with for them to like say good things about me.
Yeah.
But I those things matter to me,
mm-hmm.
right? Like making sure expectations are clear, making sure boundaries are clear, leaving space for that to change, mm-hmm. but only in a space where the model is in control of that.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think, and I know that I'm different from other photographers that I've talked to or that I see in these groups. But I agree. It's like, just because you're not paying the photographer for these photos doesn't mean that you're not providing a service.
Right.
Like your time and your image, like that's of value.
There's so much that goes into it. Makeup, hair, like there's like, I don't think that some photographers realize how much models put into the photo shoots. Mm-hmm. Like if it's a trade, like most of the time the photographer will send me a concept too. I'll have to make that outfit. I'll have to make it happen. I'll have to make sure my hair is the way they want it. My makeup is the way they want it. Like things like that. And I don't think that they realize like how much time and effort that does take, mm-hmm. and resources.
Yeah, it's a lot. And the more work you do and the more I've done, the more I have learned how much of a talent being on camera is. That I think people kind of think, oh, well, if you're good looking, your photos look good. And it's like, maybe sometimes.
You don't know how to pose,
but
then no.
Posing and presenting yourself and understanding the nuance of mm-hmm. composition and understanding how to control your body in a way that photographs well. Mm-hmm. Like there are, I don't want to say objective rules because everything in art is subjective in some sense, but there are things that are generally considered good in photography that are generally considered better in terms of composition, in terms of lighting, in terms of design. And, this idea, people throw around the idea of like, oh, I'm not photogenic. And I disagree with that in some sense because it's kind of a weird concept. Like cameras only capture reality. They don't mm-hmm. make it different than it is. So I don't love that concept, but people who are in front of the camera can be both two people who are equally awesome and have cool looks. One person can create way more dynamic images because of their experience posing and positioning themselves in ways that make the photos look good. And so there is a very much an underappreciated talent when it comes to modeling.
Yeah.
And I think culture kind of hears models and thinks like America's Next Top, like the reality TV shows, mm-hmm. and doesn't think about it in any other context. And there are lots of things that go into like making good photos and being really an expert. And so I agree. I think especially photographers who are just getting started, they don't have an appreciation for like experience.
Right.
They're just really looking for like, how do I get pretty people in my portfolio mm-hmm. so that other pretty people will want to work with me?
Right.
That's a really sad perspective. It's an unfortunate reality. But I also think this idea of, as the photographer, I'm doing you a favor. Like I just reject that.
Kills me
100%. And a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm the artist. You're the muse.
Exactly.
I'm creating this and you just got to deal with whatever I give you. And because mm-hmm. I'm not paying you, you're not paying me. Like I don't owe you anything.
What kills me about that is they look down upon the model. That's the reality of it, is they don't see the model as an equal. They see them as them doing them a favor, just like you said. Like, I'm giving you photos for your Instagram. Okay, well, I'm giving you photos for your Instagram, like, or your Facebook or your portfolio or whatever it may be. And they see it as this, like, not a trade. They see it as this favor. And that just kills me because I'm like, you would not have these photos in your portfolio if it wasn't for that model, unless you got paid from a client.
Right.
Right.
Or you paid them.
Exactly. And so it's like either pay for a model who you value and think is good enough for it, or get a client. But if you can't do either, then like, why are you complaining about what the model expects?
Yeah. And I do want to say, you know, we are generalizing. Like there are absolutely 100% quality photographers, good people who do it the right way.
Right. No,
and all that.
100%.
But there are more negatives than people want to believe.
It's that what we were just talking about, that one negative out of the 5 great, like you could have 5 great compliments and that one negative conversation, and you will always remember that one negative conversation. And that's like where I get killed, is because like I'm like, I had one negative experience and those 5 positive, I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore.
But at the same time, given the nature of the work, that makes sense. Like, photography is way more vulnerable than people think about. People now, not that people are ignorant or wrong. I don't think they do the work to think about what it is. Like, getting in front of the camera is a lot like getting on stage.
Yeah.
Like, public speaking is, I think, the number 2 fear in the world next to death. It's like public speaking. Like, people are terrified of getting on stage because there's this level of exposure and vulnerability, and people might look at me and think less of me, and it's terrifying. And that's why most people are not comfortable when they have to get up in front of a group. And that group could be 7 people in their class, much less like a huge audience. And people don't really think that photography is very similar. Like, being in front of the camera is being in front of who knows how many people,
thousands,
and also the idea that it's a capture in time. Like, once you take the photo, it's there, it's done, it exists in some capacity, and so it's not a net zero when it comes to feelings. It's not meaningless. It does matter. It does have an impact on people, and especially when a lot of us have insecurities related to our image and related to how we look. When a photo of us is taken that doesn't look good and we don't like, that doubles down on our potential negative feelings about ourselves. And or if a photo of us is taken that's compromising to us, where we're not presented in a way that we want the whole world to see us, and then that is in the hands of someone that we don't trust or who has treated us poorly, that's an extremely vulnerable and scary position to be in. And people don't think about that. They just think, oh, I want pretty photos for my Instagram. I want content. And unfortunately, there are people out there who know that, and they use the method of photography as a way of preying on people to meet their own kind of gross personal agenda. And it's not everybody, but it's more than you think.
Yeah.
And that's really sad because
it's that pick up a camera kind of mentality. And preying on women. Let's not forget that.
Right.
Like, my husband specifically is very particular on who I work with because he's very afraid of men who pick up a camera and say, let's work together, but they really just want to see me nude.
Right.
Like, and those ones who are very pressing. And that's why I really, really appreciated when you were like, hey,
what are the boundaries here?
Don't expect
that's not what I'm looking
anything.
for. Right.
Exactly. Like, I don't expect anything from this photo shoot. Like, you can go as far as you want when it comes to like
wardrobe
and whatever. Right. It's your shoot. And like, I really appreciated that because you set that expectation very early on that you did not care about how far the wardrobe went, in a sense. And that is something that a lot of photographers lack, is where they like expect a certain wardrobe
or lack thereof.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, not that they made that expectation before the shoot. It's like whenever you're there, they're like, well, why don't you lose this? You know, kind of thing.
It's kind of a slope. And then you kind of realize after you're 10 steps in, oh no,
I can't get out of this.
I can kind of see. And as much as technically, you know, people aren't holding you there hostage,
right?
There is a social circumstance that to say no is to put yourself in a really potentially dangerous situation.
Like it can hurt you.
And it can really hurt you, and it can be really damaging, and you also don't know what response you're going to get. And once again, everyone's responsible for their own decisions, and the photographer is still ultimately responsible for the way they treat you and who they are. And models are still responsible for the yeses they say and the nos they say. So like everyone's always responsible for their own decisions.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of context around it that matters. And so I run into that a lot where I've worked with people who just have horror stories.
Yeah.
Of who they've worked with, what they've done. And what's hard for me is that despite that, I still feel like portfolio always wins out. Like I've heard things about photographers that to me are deal breakers. Like if I were to have ever done the thing that I've heard stories about someone else doing, I would assume that no one would ever talk to me again, and I would be like just totally rejected from everything. And yet these photographers continue to get successful, beautiful people to come work with them because their work is just so particular or so good. And that's what's hard for me. Because
they have the following, they have the aesthetic, they have whatever.
Is that people care more about the outcome than the experience.
Right.
And, you know, there's a level of comparison that I do where I'm like, oh, so if I'm just good enough, I can be however I want to be. Like, no, that's not how I want to think about life. And that's not who I want to be. But I see people who I want to work with potentially who are working with other people who I'm like, I know things about that photographer that break my heart for the fact that people have been exposed to that type of treatment, and yet people keep going back. People who know that that's going to happen and they still do it. And yeah, I agree. I think that's a missing, that's not necessarily a misconception, but just an incomplete understanding of this world that we're in, and all that. So, you know, one of the other questions I have for people, you know, I'm assuming that you've probably been approached a lot in your life to work with, right? Like photographers have seen you as a model and reached out.
Yeah.
Is there a right way for someone to reach out to you as a model to say, hey, you know, I think you have a really unique look. I think you have a really, you know, X, Y, and Z. And is there a way for them to communicate to you professionally and purposefully that they want to shoot with you without also kind of coming across as potentially like they have some sort of personal agenda, or that they might be using photography as a way of connecting with you? Right. Like, is there even a way for a photographer you don't know to slide into the DMs safely?
See, I probably the wrong person to ask because you know me. I don't answer very many people. I am someone who's very kind of safeguarding of my peace. And at this point in my life, I don't really respond to that many messages. But if I was to talk about prior to when I stopped really actively pursuing a lot of these trade or even sometimes like paid opportunities, I would say the best way to contact me would be like, tell me exactly what you're looking for. You say like, hey, I want to do this concept. You would be great for this for these reasons. And here is like my, you know, inspiration. I want to do it on this date. Give like, if you can do it, like, let me know a time, kind of like that thing. Like, give me exact details. Because otherwise it kind of is left up in the air, you know? So giving exact details of like what you want is probably the best way to come off as not so much ulterior motive. But, you know, I don't think that that's the conversation we even had when we shot together. I think it was kind of like, hey, let's shoot. But I had already seen your work. I knew you worked with people I knew. I had this kind of underlying trust of you where I was like, he's not a bad guy, you know.
I'm glad.
And then we worked together and you're a great guy and you're one of the very few people I would work with now. So yeah, with that, like you kind of like dug me out of my hole of not modeling. I don't think I had modeled for over a year or something before we shot together. And so it was very different with you, but I would say for newer photographers or people who are trying to pursue models and in like the past when I probably would be accepting more gigs or whatever, or even like TFP, I would say just be very precise with your language and what you're wanting within the shoot, because that will build more of a foundation of trust than not. Because if you're going in very vague, I don't think I would trust you as much.
So like having the logistics figured out and being able to communicate that kind of to you communicates this is a project they're serious about.
Right.
They're not just trying to spend 2 hours with me taking photos of me and it's all up in the air what might happen.
Right, exactly. So sending me a message that's like, hey, you're very pretty, let's shoot. Like that is probably not going to come across very well to me because I'm like, okay, well, what do you want to shoot? When do you want to shoot it? Like those kind of things. Like the logistics really matter to me. And that's whenever like, I think that we quickly, whenever we set up a shoot, we quickly went over those things. Like it was like right when we started having that conversation, it was like, okay, this is where we'll do it. We'll do studio. Like you said, do you want to do more outdoor? Do you want to do studio? I chose studio. You said, okay, I know this place. We'll do it here. You booked it.
Here
like,
the concepts,
we talked about the concept. You said like, figure out what kind of wardrobe you want, kind of thing like that. And so it was very to the point of like what we were planning on doing. And I think that that really matters, that you come across as professional rather than like, just like, hey, you're a hot girl. Like I've had people slide in my DMs and be like, hey, I love doing nude shoots. Would you be open to it? No.
Right.
Like, come on, man. Like, meet me at the lake.
Right.
Like, no.
Right.
Like, I'm not freaking shooting out at the lake with my top off. Are you serious?
With someone I've never met.
Exactly. And then especially whenever to top it off, some of them would be like, and no, you can't bring someone with you. I'm like, okay, I don't trust you then.
Yeah.
Those kind of things.
No, and that happens way more than people know. I don't think, especially men, I don't think we have any real idea of what y'all's DMs look like. Like
you would cry.
Right, exactly. Like we, men a lot of times complain that like, oh, women just hate men all the time and they like speak so poorly about us and they just always assume we're gross. And it's like, well, when you have 1 million interactions and 90% of them are gross, it's hard for you to believe
that there's good
that
ones.
The next one's going to be there.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that people should just totally write off anything in general. Like we shouldn't take the majority of our experience and then just like create a world in which that's the only possible reality because you might miss out on some cool things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there needs to be empathy where we're like, oh, I realize that you have literally 50 plus messages from random strangers.
Yeah.
Not bots. Real human beings.
Every day.
Who are reaching out and who are wanting to connect and probably don't have healthy intentions and who are being inappropriate and disrespectful and objectifying and all the things that are problematic and wrong.
My DMs are crazy.
Right. And you're also someone who's very public about your relationship. So it's not even like you're like, I'm single and so therefore come on all the attention. It's like, no, you even have established your life and yet people still are disrespectful of that and kind of cross the boundaries. And so that's hard. And I think especially for photographers who are starting off, that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Which is, how do I build a portfolio? how do I connect with people who I don't know? Because I can only ask my friend. I mean, I only have so many friends to ask to take photos of. And of those friends, how many of them are actually going to be interested in doing it, right? Like a lot of people don't want their photo taken.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, how do I connect with people and how do I reach out with people? And what if I have a concept that is a little bit more, you know, vulnerable for someone to do? You know, how do I make sure that I communicate my intentions and correctly? And to me, the sad thing is that a lot of that's just character development. Like when someone asks, like, how do I not be creepy? I'm like, what do you mean? Like,
it's not very hard.
Right. Like I understand, because I wrestle with this of if you have a concept that you want to do, but you know, it's a little bit more, it'll take a little bit more. Yeah. Maybe it's that, or literally just like, it'll take a little bit more experience or trust to shoot in whatever concept. Even if it's like a maturity thing where like you're involving someone's kids in it, like that's an extra level of vulnerability that you're asking from someone.
Right.
Like I understand, how do you ask someone who you don't have a prior relationship with to think about doing a shoot or working together? Right. Because that is hard.
It is.
And I know what the stereotype is that I'm going to have to go up against and disprove before I can even prove myself. Like I have to prove you wrong before I can even prove myself right. And I understand that that's the situation that I'm in because of how male photographers have chosen to conduct themselves on the whole. So I understand that. But the whole, like, how do I talk to someone and not accidentally be creepy? Like, this is what?
It's like, very easy.
Like there's objectively respectful ways of talking to people. Some people might be okay with certain things that other people might not be okay with, but there are certain things that are totally above reproach no matter what. And yet people still are like, what? No, like this girl like totally freaked out on me that I said this thing. And then I'm like, well, what'd you say? And they're like, oh, I just said this thing. And I was like,
clearly there's a reason.
Okay. I mean, I get that you might have some friends where that's okay with, but when you don't know someone, be above reproach. That concept is so foreign to men, I feel like, in a lot of ways, because they know one person who's down with it. And it's like, I get that people have different boundaries, have different preferences, and have certain words are triggering to some people. Right. Like, and you need to be aware of that. But especially in an industry that's about image, like that's the hard part. Yeah, is modeling is inherently surface level.
So how do you typically approach people that you don't know? Out of curiosity, I'm not a photographer, so
I actually rarely do. I almost never cold call people for that exact reason.
Except for
except for you. And in some ways, I even felt like, hey, I had kind of some mutuals. So I didn't feel like I was going in
too deep,
blind,
too cold.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, for me, I just have decided the last thing I ever want to do in a shoot, the last thing I ever want is for someone to have any doubt about my intentions.
Right.
And I think it's almost impossible for me to cold call someone, slide into the DMs with an interest in working together, where there's absolutely no hint of like, okay, but, right? Like I can be as professional and as respectful and do all the things I need to do on my side. But with the reality of our culture and me not knowing what their experience is with other photographers, there's no way for me to guarantee 100% that like they might not have some sort of like eyebrow raise of like, okay, but are you just trying to use this as an excuse to connect with me and potentially move into other spaces?
Right.
And so I kind of made a decision that I'm willing to lose out on 50% of really amazing opportunities to guarantee that 100% of the things I do are safe and good and above reproach and never have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Because I would rather know that I'm never putting anybody in a position unintentionally where they're wondering, is this really about the art?
Right.
I don't ever want that to be a concern. Now, I can only do my part, and I may have worked with people who have had concerns, And
I don't think so.
Right. And hopefully not, but I don't know what other people's experiences are. And so I kind of I made that decision of like, I'm not going to cold call. I'm not going to reach out and try to be like, hey, you have a really beautiful look, or you have really interesting tattoos, or you have a really unique hairstyle or just vibe that I would love to capture.
Right.
Because it's not worth it to me. And the other part of that is I don't ever want to create a box and then look for people to fit into it. I don't really ever want to say, here's my idea. Who's willing to do my idea? What I would prefer to do is to say, hey, here's some ideas that I have. What do you think about them? And then let someone else say, oh, I really like that. And then we hone in there, because I would so much rather work on a project where both of us are equally as invested and excited about the concept. Where it's not like, hey, I have this idea, I have this location, I have this wardrobe. Will you show up? Will you wear this? Will you pose like this? And we'll go our separate ways. I want to work with people where that person who I'm working with, I'm collaborating with, who they have a personal stake in, like, I love this concept. I'm excited for this to come to life. I want these photos too. And when you cold call someone, generally you're trying to ask them to do something for you. And I would much rather be in a creative situation where I'm saying, what do we want to do?
Right.
And what is it that you're excited about? Here's my thoughts about that. And we can create something together. But I know that's not common. And I know I lose out on a lot of shoots because there are probably a lot of people who are totally fine being asked by random photographers to do shoots. And I'm sure that my portfolio is not as big as it could be because I'm not reaching out to everyone that, I run across on Instagram and throwing out my kind of hook and catching, enough people to work with. But I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Because I know that all the shoots I'm doing, they are creative collaborations that we're both excited about. And I know that I'm giving someone something that they actually want, that they're proud of.
Right.
Versus, being like, oh, I had this idea, I had this concept, you did it, and I got the photos that I wanted, but maybe you didn't. And the idea of giving someone photos where they're like, I just did it because you needed me to. There's nothing wrong with that, I guess, but it's not why I love the craft. And so it's just not where I want to spend my time.
For sure.
But it's a challenge, and I could talk for hours and hours about this thing. So you are kind of somewhat doing creative stuff.
Yeah.
You're a full-time, parent and wife, and you're doing all the things, and you are full. You have a full plate.
Yeah.
If you met someone who was like, hey, so I don't have a full plate, and I'm looking to get into this business. I'm looking to get into these experiences. What would be your biggest piece of advice you'd give them?
When it comes to modeling or just content creation in general?
Either.
Okay. When it comes to content creation in general, just start doing. Honestly, if you love content creation, you can do it. No matter if it's making vlogs or, more professional, what you do, photography, you can pick up a marketplace DSLR and just start shooting whatever you want to shoot and then progress over time. There is no rules when it comes to creativity. And so no matter what it is, just start, because you're never going to be the best at what you do starting out. There's always going to be someone who's better than you. There's always going to be someone who looks down upon you. There's always going to be that person from high school that's judging you for whatever you're doing. So just whatever makes you happy, do it. And so when it comes to content creation, I've really had to learn to just do it. So make those vlogs, post those cringy hauls, do what makes you happy, because no matter what, at the end of the day, that's all that freaking matters. It's all that matters. And so even though you're not going to be the best at it, those editing is going to be really choppy at first. It's not going to matter, because one day you're going to look back at it and be like, hey, I perfected my craft. And I did what I was supposed to do, and I kept at it, and now look at me. So when it comes to beginners, that's all I have to say is just get at it. And I feel like everybody says that whenever they're talking to someone about starting something, is like, just start. And it's true. Just start, because my editing sucked at first, and now I'm able to edit way quicker than I was whenever I first started. And I'm sure when I'm talking about video creation, I'm sure with you for photography, you're way quicker than you were when you first started.
For sure, no doubt.
And so it's just, you have to learn how to do it, and you're never going to learn if you don't start. So that's my advice when it comes to just general content creation, is find your niche, find what you want to do, and then do it. Look up the YouTube video, look up the TikTok, figure it out. You're going to be okay. You're going to have fun. If it's fun for you, do it. Whenever it comes to modeling, find that photographer who's trying to build their portfolio and just get in front of the camera. You're going to figure it out. It's like, if you have a want for it, you're going to make it happen. But also, when it comes to new models and people who are trying to be in front of the camera, advocate for yourself. Do not be the person who lets someone run all over you, because your mental health is going to pay for it. So I would just say, make sure you're advocating for what you want and what you want from the shoot. And then from there, you should be all good. But, I think it's easier said than done when you first start. And I think it takes some time to set those boundaries and make those connections and find someone who's willing to work with your boundaries, recognize those red flags, and say no when you have to. And then build from there. But consistency is key for everything. So stay consistent and you'll be okay.
Yeah, that's good. I think, looking for your red flags, even knowing what your red flags would be.
Yeah.
And identifying what those boundaries are going to be before you start. Not that you can't adjust as you go and learn and pivot, but knowing what to look out for. Knowing your boundaries, thinking about them. I'm thinking about the implications of crossing them is also huge. And the other thing I tell people is please talk to other people who have worked with the photographer who's reaching out to you. Right. Reach out to the person they shot with. Get referrals. Yeah. Talk to people who have worked with them, because they're going to be honest with you, and they have, the photographer has every reason to present themselves in the best light. Right. But if they don't have people who have good things to say about working with them, that's a really bad sign. Big red flag. Big red flag. And people who feel like, oh, I don't want you talking to other people I've worked with. If no one has good things to say about you or them, that's a problem. And I'm real big. That's why you're one of my favorite people ever, because you wrote a review. That's probably one of my favorites I've ever had. Now, it's the first one I have on my Instagram too. And, I think people probably think I paid you to write that, because it's so great. But reviews are really important. I'm obviously think I'm great. Otherwise, why would I be going out and doing these things? But what I have to say about myself shouldn't mean anything to you. What other people have to say about me should hold a lot more weight. And so, for sure, look at people's reviews. Talk to people who have worked with the photographer who wants to work with you. Yeah. Get honest feedback, because that's what's really going to matter. Yeah. And yeah, being, like you said, being an advocate for yourself. I know it's scary. I know it can be uncomfortable, but say no. Yeah. Say no the first time. And once again, I don't know what it's like in any way to be in that sort of uncomfortable, vulnerable position. I won't ever claim to know how much pressure it is. And so I'm not saying, oh, it's easy, just say no when you feel uncomfortable. I would just say the photographer's feelings don't matter.
No.
Like they just don't. Not as a human being they matter, and as a human being
your mental health matters more.
But like this is like them feeling quote unquote rejected professionally is not as significant as your own self-worth and value, and feeling like you are not being manipulated and being taken advantage of. Because it's not a 1-for-1 trade of vulnerability. Like you as the model are putting yourself at risk emotionally way more than the photographer is. Mm-hmm. And so it's not like they're here and they wanted me to do this and so I should do it. It's like, no, you need to do what's safe for you, and you need to do what's good for you. And I get that you might say yes and you think it's good in the moment, and later you decide that, hey, maybe you're not okay with that. I hope that photographer is someone who you can reach out to and be like, hey, I'm not comfortable with what we did. Published. Right. Please don't publish them, or please don't even keep them, or whatever.
Right.
And, I tell people, get that in writing. Like I know I sent you an email of like, here's exactly what we're going to, and I do this with everybody. Yeah. Like, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm not going to do. Here's the expectation of how the photos are going to be used. You're going to have to give me a written permission before I can use them anywhere, because you should never see a photo out in the world that you didn't know about and approve.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if, they think you look great in it.
Right.
If you don't like it and they didn't pay you for it, then they don't get the right to say, hey, I'm going to post this. Like it's just, and maybe that's just a moral position that I have, and maybe that's just an ethical standard that I feel, but to me, like, that is how it should be.
Yeah.
And I know not everyone agrees with that. And
well, you've set the standard for me, that's for sure, because I will never work with someone who doesn't respect me enough to not allow me to say no, Yeah. Because if someone is so hell-bent that they're like, no, my craft is more important than your value of yourself and your insecurities, like, that is just not okay to me. And so now I refuse to work with people, and that has literally turned me off. When I have seen photographers talk in these modeling groups about how they don't respect models' opinions in that sense, I'm like, no matter how much I care and like your craft and like what you're doing on your end, I will never work with you because you've said that. So
yeah, I think the human experience gets lost in arts like this.
Yeah.
Because you can't remove the emotions and the vulnerability and the self-value from the art. You just can't. Like, I get there's professional models who walk in, do the thing, and leave, and they've been able to compartmentalize.
Yeah.
But even that's hard. Mm-hmm. Like, even it's hard to be quote unquote used for your image, used for your looks, right? And in some sense, modeling is kind of like that. Like, I'm like, my biggest value is what I look like.
Right.
And but that should never be your identity. That should never be your whole self. And so it is hard to do this in a significant way and not run into like feeling like I'm the only reason I'm here is because of how I look. Mm-hmm. And my value is the image that I bring. And so it's already such a messy art form. And for me, I try to always remember, or at least always prioritize, like, the human experience is more important than the artistic experience. It doesn't matter how good the photos are. If someone walks away from a shoot with me where they didn't feel safe, respected, celebrated, comfortable, then I failed. Like, I didn't do my job. It doesn't matter if the photos are beautiful. It doesn't even matter if they like some of the photos. If their experience during was, they might have been a little uncomfortable, they might have felt a little pressured or a little like confused or like, oh, I don't love that. That's unacceptable. And it might be because, they didn't tell me what their boundaries were, or they said something that wasn't true or whatever. So at the end of the day, I can only do what I can do, and I'm gonna try my best. But ultimately, it's about like, did they have a positive experience? Because if they have a great experience and don't love the photos, no harm, no foul. Mm-hmm. Nothing bad came out of it, right? They didn't get the extra great photos, and that's sad. But like, that's really meaningless in the grand scheme of your life and how they feel. But if they get great photos but felt gross in any way during, like that's not a win. And I just think, like you're saying, a lot of creative people forget about the human element,
right,
and just approach it very professionally
as a job,
as a business. And it's like, no, you can be professional and treat it like a business in the way you handle the logistics and the way that you approach it in terms of like, you're not asking them out for coffee. But like, if you don't respect the fact that someone with real feelings, real emotions, and real insecurities is standing in front of you, trusting you with their image and likeness, that's an incomplete version of how this should be. And you need to remember that human being that's there, who said yes to trust you with themselves, you owe them not just not being gross and not just not being disrespectful, but you owe them respect, like gentleness, like patience, like initiative to ask questions. You owe them that because they're a human being more than they are a muse.
Yeah.
And you can't compromise one for the other.
Right.
And I totally, obviously it's very clear this is a soapbox I could be on for a long time.
Yeah.
But it's also why I've created the processes I have for my own work, because I want to avoid ever, to the best of my ability, avoid ever being in situations where you feel like, oh, I feel kind of not heard, not valued, and not in the way you should. Mm-hmm. All right. Reagan. Do you go by Ray often, or do you go by Reagan?
I really only go by Ray, but my family calls me Reagan.
Do you like Ray more than Reagan?
I like Ray more than Reagan.
All right, well.
Yeah.
Ray it is.
It's funny that you know my name. How do you know my name? My legal name?
We've only been friends for like 2 years, so,
I feel like I don't put Reagan out there often.
I think your email's Reagan.
That's probably it.
When I first met you. And I was
it's Reagan.Nemetsky.
Also, I'm not sure that anybody's just named Ray.
Nah.
Besides Star Wars. Ray. But that's with an E, and I shouldn't nerd out too much right now.
Is hers with a Y?
R-E-Y.
Hers is a Y?
Pretty sure.
Okay. I don't know. I'm an R-A-E.
Yeah, well, for now. You might change it up. You love to change your handles.
I do love that.
All right. Well, first of all, you're great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Mm-hmm. It's hard to catch you at times. You're like, I'll say mediocre texter to be nice.
He thinks I'm a terrible texter.
Well, you are. I mean, you're objectively horrific, but at least you know it. And that's really more important. The self-awareness is much more important.
Very self-aware.
Well, yeah, let's go with that. Very self-aware.
I walked in here and said,
great.
I am the worst.
That's true. You did. Yeah, you were real like, I'm going to get in front of this.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, right, I know I'm the worst.
I know. So it's been 10 months. So sorry about this. But no, you are, you're so talented.
Thank you.
And you do so many things, and the things that you do are, I think, underappreciated at times. The things that you have to balance and the things you have to juggle. And I know you have a lot of life stuff that most of us can't even begin to comprehend what that's like to handle. And you have many hearts and minds that rely on you for support and love and all the things. And people, especially our age, generally don't know what it's like to have that much responsibility relationally. And so thanks for making the time to be here. Thanks for making the time to be my friend and creative partner at times. But I just wanted to say that. I want to make sure that you know that you're great, and I'm very thankful for you. And I know that we'll probably continue to make cool stuff at some point. But I just wanted to say that.
Well, thank you for having me on. And I have always appreciated you as a friend and a creative partner. So I feel like the same sentiment goes to you. And I feel like I've been kind of, talking about how great you are of respecting people's boundaries and everything like that. And I want everybody to know that you are super respectful and just a great friend and photographer in general. So
well, thank you.
Just wanted to say that too.
I appreciate that. I hope for all of the people who
he's not paying me.
I'm not.
I promise.
I'm not. I really am not. And I hope all the people that stayed here, I think we're at like an hour 10, who have stayed to listen to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the real G's anyway. And so I've never said that before. That's a real shame that got recorded. Yeah, I get nervous. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Of course.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap this up. And that's all.